There are two ways to know about God. One of them is intellectually, as an idea, right? An hypothesis, a theological proposition. When you pursue God in that way, you start by asking questions that come out of your own experience in the way of the world. We seek answers to them. Sometimes those answers surprise us. We can't control answers, but we always control the questions. And that's a way to have a little bit of control. Now, the other way, the better way, I might say, of knowing God is to have an encounter. To have Him walk into a room, so to speak. And when this happens, you can still ask questions. But now you have to answer the ones He asks. He doesn't just have to answer ours. Because now He's revealing parts of Himself that He wants to reveal. And whether we have asked questions or not, that's who God is. We're no longer in control in an encounter. The God that we encounter sometimes is very different from the gods that we have in our minds. That would be last week's sermon. Today we're going to talk about this story from John 4, the woman at the well. I want to highlight a few things in it so that we know more about this story that may cause some discussion to permeate in your brain, some better questions maybe to ask. Because first of all, this story is great because it changes momentum quite a bit. Jesus is in control to start the story. Then the woman at the well takes control for a little bit, and then just as quickly, Jesus turns the subject and takes control again. It's a really great back and forth as she tries to get control of the conversation again. So I'm going to read, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. John 4, 1 through 6, just to start. Page 1804. Now, Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John. Although, in fact, it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. So he left Judea, and he went back once more to Galilee. Now, he had to go through Samaria. So one day, Jesus left Judea. He's been doing his thing there. He wants to go north. But in order to do that, he has to go through Samaria. Well, okay, he didn't have to go through it, right? He didn't have to go through it. He could have done what every other Jewish person in his day did. He would have left the area he was in. He would have gone east by the Jordan River, and then he would have gone north to avoid it altogether. If you remember the story of the Good Samaritan a few weeks ago, they don't tend to get along. We'll get into that a little bit more. That's essentially like me saying, I've got to go to Wings, etc. from here for lunch, obviously. Where else am I going to go? I got to go there. But I need to avoid Wendy's. Because I would just go straight up, right? And I'd go whoop, and then left. I'd be almost right there. But I can't go anywhere near a Wendy's. So in order to get there, I leave here. I go all the way past the 4-H fairgrounds. I keep going till I see US 30, where it finally bends back over and catches. And then I go left off of there again to find a country road that I can go right on, and then I turn right till I'm behind Walmart, and then I can go this way and finally find my way into Wings, etc. This is how the other Jews would go north to avoid Samaria. They would go all the way out of their way to make sure they don't step into it. In this moment, I'm reminded of the old joke. If you're in Bloomington, you know how to find West Lafayette? You just go north till you smell it, and then west till you step in it. Anyway, this is the essential idea. I got to avoid West Lafayette on my way home, right? I got to avoid it. This is what they did. As roundabout as you could possibly imagine. He didn't have to go north through Samaria, but John tells us now he had to go through Samaria. Jesus, he heads through Samaria instead of avoiding it. He gets there first before his disciples. These disciples have gone out to find food, and so he sits down by the well and he waits. And pretty soon, about noon, a woman comes walking to the well. Let's hear it. Just 7 through 8. 5 through 8. Sorry, here we go. So he comes to a town in Samaria called Sychar, and near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. And Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from this journey, sat down by the well, and it was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" For his disciples had gone into town to purchase food. So he waits. In Samaria, a place Jews don't go. At noon, I don't know if you've ever been outside at noon in the Middle East in the summertime. It's pleasant. And he sits to wait right there. And around noon, a woman comes walking towards the well. Women did all the carrying of water back in this day. So she stays at the 10-foot pole mark, though, when she notices Jesus sitting there and won't go near him. Wells are generally private little settings, so she's giving a good amount of space. And so Jesus looks up and he asks her, "Will you give me something to drink?" Now, she could just say no. She has every right to just say no. It's a private setting. But she says this. She says, "You're a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How could you ask me for a drink?" Jews and Samaritans don't associate with one another. Now, I've said this before, but just to refresh our memories about this Jew versus Samaritan thing. 722 BC, the Assyrians come into northern Israel, and they scatter all the people as they take it over. They migrated foreigners into the area. This is all from 2 Kings 18. And so the people that started to settle in this area, called Samaria, were Jews that were, that later on the southern kingdom of Judah would consider these Samaritans, there's really not a better way to say it. They're half-breeds. They're as bad as you can imagine. Idol worshippers. They worshipped Yahweh, but the same God that the Jews did, but they also worshipped other ones that got integrated in when they were conquered by Assyria. And so there's this long-standing rivalry between Jews and Samaritans. They really do just like viscerally hate each other. There's not a rivalry today that encapsulates it as a great analog. Like, there's nothing I can tell you in like modern day America that is enough visceral hatred between two groups to encapsulate what they have between each other. 750 years of continual fighting between these two groups. They would burn the other one's temple, then the other one would sneak into the other temple at night, and they would scatter animal parts and desiccate the temple with animal pieces and blood to make it unclean for temple worship. They really don't like each other. And she knows full well exactly what he... Oh, I got to read the next bit. See, I jumped ahead. She says, "You're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it was that asked you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." She knows full well what this means. Living water is moving water. Okay, this moving water. Living water is just water that is in motion. It's flowing. It's water that comes from this divine origin. It's water from a brook. It's water from a river, right? It's not water that's contained in a receptacle or in like a pool or anything like that. It's moving, living water. It's used for cleaning. Surely she would know this. This is why some Christian traditions say that in order to be baptized properly, it has to be from water that is in motion. It has to be from living water. If you've ever seen baptismals that have a little thing that like circulates water the whole time, that's because then the water's moving and it satisfies that little thing. But this is this idea. She says, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as he did also his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water that I give them will become as if a spring of water wells up in eternal life." And the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't go thirsty and have to keep coming back here to draw water." She goes, "I get it, but like I know how wells work, and you're sitting here with no bucket. You've got nothing you could possibly draw this living water up with. Are you better than Jacob, right, who gave us this well, and he drinks from it, and all of his sons, and all of his herds? Are you better than him? You can get this water without even a bucket to draw from the thing." And she's like, "You don't even know how wells work. How are you going to give me water?" And Jesus says, "Everyone who drinks of this water will thirst again, but anyone who drinks from the water that I give you will never thirst. It'll be inside of you, springing up and bubbling new life and infecting everything about yourself. And so she says, give me this water so I don't have to come back here. Now I want you to watch this conversation change. Okay, it's going to move from this prejudice to cleansing. Okay, watch as our conversation here is about to change. 16 through 20. You ready? He tells her, go, call your husband and come back. I have no husband, she replied. Jesus said to her, you're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you have had 5, and the man that you have now isn't even your husband. So what you have said is quite true. Sir, the woman said, I can see that you're a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. Woman, Jesus replied, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither at this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans will worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has come when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God in spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and truth. The woman said, I know that the Messiah called Christ is coming, and when he comes, he will explain everything to us. And Jesus declared, I'm the one speaking to you. I am he. Samaritans only believed in a single prophet, just one, that he would follow Moses, he would be the Messiah, and she said, you must be that guy, is what you're claiming. Tell me then, why is it that when you Jews say those who worship God have to worship on a mountain in Jerusalem, and we Samaritans say that the ones who worship God will worship on a mountain here called Gerizim? Which one is right then, if you are the guy that knows all these answers? Which is the correct way to do this? This is what she's getting at. Jerusalem and Gerizim are not just mountains. These are entire theological backgrounds. Jerusalem and Gerizim are complete ideologies. They're not just a place that someone worships. They are two complete distinct ways of thought. They're two discrete what theologies. They're fully formed. They have all the things inside of them. And so the moment that Jesus commits himself to one of those two answers, she knows exactly where to put him. If he says which one is right, she knows right where to put him. I know, if you tell me that I've got to be a grown adult before I'm allowed to be baptized, and I've got to read this particular thing, and you've got to dunk me fully underwater and then come back up, you know to put me in the Baptist idea. You know exactly if I say that's the right way. You with me? But if I say, well, we'll do infants, and you can just sprinkle them sometimes, and then that gets rid of damnable original sin, you'd be like, oh, so you're Catholic. You with me? This is what we're getting at here. If he answers which one, he is now formed into one of these two fully formed ideologies. You belong in that category as soon as he gives the answer. So what he does is he transcends this argument. He doesn't give her the answer. Jesus gets asked a lot of questions, and he doesn't really give a lot of direct answers to them. Usually he goes, let me tell you a story. Here he says, you worship what you don't even know. Think about their sermon last week, right? We have this image that this is what we know. We know this is completely true, and then all of a sudden you don't know it anymore. And that image you have dies, and it's got to be rebuilt as you figure out what is real, what's not. You worship what you don't even know. And it leads into this question that I have when I come to this, and it's a question I've struggled with, and I never know the best way for me to go with it. Is every time I feel like I have come up with this is God, I know it, this is 100% it, I have to ask myself, did I put God in a box? Did I put him in a container that I've got to eventually let him break out of? I usually will. He usually will break out eventually. But I'll come to my firm beliefs, and I know it 100%, and I build a little box, and I put the lid down, and I go, thank you, and I put him inside of it. I mean, I hear Jesus, right? He and I I pray, I meditate, I do all these things. Jesus in here, he's saying worship is not defined by the categories that we use to define him. This mountain, this thing, that thing. We're boxing it in as soon as we define it in one way or the other. It's not about whether it's acceptable or unacceptable. Worship is not an intellectual thing. Worship is about whether or not you know him. I think about Ashley sorry, Ashley, this is a story I'm adding now at the last second. No, you know what? I'm going to change it. Maybe I've told this story before. If you've heard it, I'll stop. I'll tell a different one. When I was at a different church, I was giving a sermon. Ashley was up in a tech booth running slides. Right? You were up doing slides or something, and I was doing a sermon about one thing or the other. And at one point, I said a thing, and I said, no one in here knows this. Lots of people think you know my wife. You got all the head knowledge there is to know about her. You know her name, what her kids' names are, that she's kind of tall, that you definitely want to be friends with her because if you're her enemy, she's like a bulldozer that just, yeah, I mean, like, you with me. You know these things, right? You know these things. She's strong-willed. I know it because we have a 4-year-old. That is a miniature version of them. And so she's up there and I'm doing it. And at one point I say something like, no one in here knows this because I have experiences with my wife that goes beyond head knowledge. Like we have encounters. And she has the absolute smelliest feet that have ever existed. It is insane. It is like, I can't even, it is so, podiatrists need to be called, it is so bad. And this person, I tell this story in the sermon, I tell it, Ashley's up top, she's like, yeah, pretty much, right? She's like, yeah, they stink, I know, and I'm not ashamed of it. It's who I am as a person. And this person comes up to me, and here's the sermon, comes up afterward, and they said, I can't believe you would talk about your wife like that. And I said, you know my wife, I know my wife. You with me the difference? It's not just whether or not you have the head knowledge of God and to worship. It's whether or not you have the experience. Do you know them? So do you know him? I don't. Not fully. Have I met him? Sure. How many ways are there that maybe I have created systems and structures so that I make God fit inside to help my brain come to an intellectual understanding to make it make sense fully. But then I need to meet God at some point, and it's never what I expect. Just to point out kind of 3 things with this. The first one is this, okay? There comes a time when the God that you go looking for finds you first. That's the best. Until that time, you're wandering around on your way to Jerusalem. You're going whichever direction. You'll go wherever you think you need to go in order to find him, because this is how you apprehend God. You're like, I know he's over here, right? You're doing this thing. You're sneaking up. I'm going to sneak up on this guy. That's how you get. Then one day, as you're sneaking up, you get tapped on the shoulder and he's standing behind you. One day you're walking around thinking you're avoiding, and all of a sudden he's sitting beside a well asking you for water. Waiting for you to show up. And your hunt is over. C.S. Lewis, it wouldn't be inspired by... I wouldn't be married to someone who went to Taylor if I didn't invoke C.S. Lewis at some point, so here we go. C.S. Lewis always said it's a dreadful thing for a human being to pass God from an idea into being a living thing. It's a dreadful thing when they go from an idea to a real living God. There comes a time, he says, when children that have been playing burglar hear the sounds of footsteps in the hallway. All of a sudden it becomes a little more real. What if we found him? Or worse, for C.S. Lewis, what if he found us? We didn't intend for it to come to this, but there's a moment when the God that you're looking for finds you first. And when he does, he's not the one that you imagine you've been chasing. He doesn't fit into your idea of ethnicity, whoever it is that you are. He's not captive to all the different ologies that you figured out, that you know all the right answers to. And he doesn't fit into all those ideologies. He's not a poster child for the things that you believe in. He defies all of the theological categories you could try to box him into. We don't have language for this. One of the things that is so frustrating, when we do our Wednesdays things, we do this thing, and I say, one of the things you have to understand when you start talking about theology is you have to be comfortable with things that are mysterious. You just have to know, at some point I won't have an answer for you anymore. I don't know. I don't know. We don't have language for this sometimes. Everything in you, in the moment, wants to run. In like a true God's crept up on you encounter, it's to run. But you stay. You're both torn between ashamed and accepted. Everything is restless, but there's this piece. This is a home moment, even as frightening as it can be. This is the mysterium tremendum. This is about the give and take of the encounter with God, right? My question then, have you ever had one of those encounters? You're like, I'm going to find him over here, and bam, he's on the other side, and you didn't think about it. This is what the woman at the well had. She's not expecting to run into the Messiah drinking from a well in Samaria. The second thing, that whenever he finds you, he's going to put a finger on the most sensitive part of your life. It's a part we don't like to talk about. Everybody in the whole village knows you've been married 5 times. And the man that you're with now isn't even your husband. They're talking about you in town. That's why you went out to get water at noon. Because every other woman goes up and gets it early in the morning or late at night when it's not as hot out. But you go out at noon in the heat of the day because you don't want to run into anybody. But there he was, putting his finger right on the part of the life that she's most ashamed of. I think it's presumptuous to call this woman immoral. You hear too many of these sermons where this woman is painted as this, like, whatever, right? We don't know that. We have no idea what's going on. Only men could call for a divorce back in those days. Not women. She could have been abandoned 5 times for all that we know. The man she's living with right now was probably in order to eat. If you think about old culture, and I've said this many times, but everything runs through the systems of male. If you're a woman who's unmarried, having been divorced, you are essentially have no home, no ability to vote, no ability to do anything. So she could desperately be living with someone just to have a roof over her head and the ability to buy food in the market. Because once she's been abandoned and she moves in with someone, or she becomes a prostitute, she may have chosen the lesser of those two. Maybe that's the story. We don't know. Right? We have no idea. But to paint her as some immoral creature thing is a horrible way to read into this. Whatever the story is, she is ashamed by the position that she's in. So she goes out at noon. There will come a time in your life when you will meet him. And when you do, he's going to put his finger right on that part of you that you are most ashamed of. He'll go there. I think that we've been so busy trying to make God someone that we can just be like an associate with, that he is no longer like us in any way. So therefore, God really can't call us out. You know what I mean? There's only so many people in my life that I would be okay if they were like, Phil, I'm going to call you out here on something. There's only so many of them, right? Everybody else that's my acquaintance better keep their mouth shut. You with me with this feeling? If we make him like that, he can't ever call us out. He's too busy just trying to understand the situation that we found ourselves in. But to place your life in God's hand, right? He touches with living water. He puts his finger right on that thing, and from it bursts out something different. The reason he brings it up is so that it can be cleansed. That's why if you've ever had one of those sneaky experiences with God where you're having a little hash out about something you're a little bit ashamed of. There's both a shame but also a feeling of contentment and welcoming. And right when you think you might want to start drawing back, it gives you something different. The third thing, that once you drink the water that Jesus gives in this encounter, it's going to change your whole identity every time. Every time I've had a reshaping, rehashing, I've tumbled down into the theological cliff where the image of God is whatever, and all my pillars I thought were important have been shattered all the way around me. That's usually the first 5 days of seminary. They just like rip everything you think you know apart, and you're laying at the bottom, and you're like, I could really go for, a scotch at this point in my life, right? You're hanging at the very bottom. It's going to be rebuilt. It's going to have something new given to you. This is this water. You're going to have this encounter, and it's going to change the identity that you have every time. Seminary changed the way that I encounter God and understand God in some way. It was by breaking down things I thought I knew, things that I was ashamed of, and being completely rebuilt. You'll talk about it for the rest of your life. Honestly, that's why I like What Theology. I get to talk about these cool encounters where I've been completely torn apart. You will become, the new thing is a centerpiece for you. It's something you're going to build your life around. Other decisions can be made later, but that one will be an absolute turning point in your life. Like the woman in this story, you turn around and you go back into the village and you start talking to the very people you were trying to avoid. She goes out at noon, not to run into anyone. She's ashamed of absolutely anything that's going on. And she turns around, many Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. Hold everything I ever said. So when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with them. She goes back to all these people. She's been avoiding them her whole life. Five former husbands, the person she's living with now isn't even that. I'm going to go out in the burning hot sun at noon to get my water for the day. But after this encounter, the centerpiece, I'm going into the middle of this town. I'm telling everyone what I've just encountered. Come see this man that told me everything that I ever did. People will listen because there is a power that comes out of you that's not your own. The words will not just fall on the ground. I can't make it happen. I want this for everybody in here. I want this encounter to be something. I can't make it happen. If I could, I would do it. You know what I mean? Like, if I could, I don't think I would be a human, right? I want it to happen. I don't know whether your head is full of theology or philosophy, whether you know everything or nothing about religion. I don't know if you grew up in a church and you haven't done many things wrong, or if you grew up a long way from church with almost no interest in religion, and you just were wandered into church one day several years ago, and you're like, well, these people seem nice, I guess, and you've sat down and that's been your thing. I don't know where you're at on that whole thing, but you've been here and checked it out. I don't know what you've ever done before. I don't know if you're running from something. I don't know what the subject is to even bring up if I were to try to meet you. Probably you'd be highly offended if I tried to bring it up. But I want you to meet him. And when you do meet him, he's not who you think he is. He's so much other and so much more than the touching in the place of the life to bring you into cleansing. And when he does, the rest of your life changes and is set to a different thing. Let's pray.